7:31. Perfect. And then we'll start the introductions and okay, thanks everyone. My name is Kim Parson. I'm the president of the Central Memorial Parents Society and Council for 2021-2022. We're here tonight for the parent engagement presentation done by the University of Calgary. It's titled Supporting Your High School Child's Career Journey. And tonight we have two presenters. We've got David Cataford and Vicky Hirshe. David has been working in the career development since 2002 and has been working as a career development specialist at Career Services at the University of Calgary for the past 15 plus years. He helps students develop amazing targeted resumes and cover letters. David also helps with job search, prepping for interviews, and helps students grow and maintain their professional networks. Vicky Hirshe has worked in student leadership development at the U of C for 7 years. Her current role is the Life Design and Work Integrated Learning Specialist with the Leadership and Student and Engagement Office. Her passion is helping students discover and hone their unique skills and strengths and use design thinking tools to set up and achieve goals for a meaningful future. Vicky has also completing her Master's of Education in Adult and Higher Education Learning. So thank you to you both for joining us this evening. We really appreciate this, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. I think Victoria is going to get off to kind of start it off.
Yeah,
and then I'm going to do more of the
thanks for those introductions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so just to kick things off, we did just want to acknowledge that this workshop is being facilitated on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, and that the city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and just something that's important to us coming from the University of Calgary and facilitating this on the land. I'll pass it over to David for his intro.
And then, yeah, so what we're really going to talk about at the beginning part, Victoria is going to cover a lot on, is the Clifton strengths. So I have my top 5 Clifton strengths, and this is a really amazing tool to help, well, it helped me really understand who I am and how I work. And these are my top 5 talents. So empathy, adaptability, developers actually my favorite, and includer and positivity. And I'm just a kind of a fun person that likes to, students always seem to come in and like, oh, help me with my career, and they're kind of worried, and I'm like, well, let's put a positive spin on it. You're in the right place. Let's have some fun. Let's think about your future. So that's me dressed as Austin Powers, and then that's me with my amazing parents that still live here in Calgary with me. So that's my intro slide.
Beautiful. Yeah. And then, yes, so I work in the leadership and student engagement office at U of C, and there's definitely, some career overlaps there, but really just try to support students in building their resume and their experiences outside the classroom, getting involved in volunteering, giving back to the community, doing personal development work to kind of see what are they good at, what do they like doing, how can they make the most out of their experience as a student. And yes, I also have my kind of strengths up here, which will make more sense later in the presentation, but intellection, input, strategic, empathy, and relator. So David and I share the empathy one on that. Yeah, and then I just really enjoy kind of getting outside. That's me dragging my dog on the paddleboard. She likes it when she's on there, but it's a little hard getting her on at the beginning, but we have a good time. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so not sure how much you kind of know or what you're expecting to get out of the session today, but really what we're here to kind of talk about is we're going to talk about kind of taking a strengths-based perspective to supporting your student in their career development journey, really thinking about how you might be able to identify and support some of your child or student's strengths. David's going to go through some amazing information on the career development process, kind of some of the coaching and support that he gives to students that we think is really helpful to know, some of the services that we provide and some of the advice that we give to the real students that we talk to and support all the time in our work. And then we're going to try to end early so that we can open it up to some questions and discussion, and you can ask us anything that this session might spark or about career development or supporting your student in this journey. So we'll really open it up to everyone, but very excited to be here with you all today.
And also, too, we should mention that Victoria is an alumni of Central Memorial.
Oh, I forgot to mention that. I should have put that on my slide. I did go to Central Memorial High School. I graduated in 2009, so it's been a little bit now, but I was very excited when we got this invitation. Great school, so propelled me to where I am today. Beautiful. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about taking a strengths-based perspective with supporting your student. And so just to kind of dial it back a little bit, I'm going to share a little bit about where this comes from. So we use this at U of C in a lot of different contexts: personal development work, academic development, career development, but it's Clifton Strengths, and it comes from the Gallup organization. I'm not sure if people have heard of this before. It's something you're familiar or it's new. But it's this really great model that looked at a lot of really good research about what did high achievers in a variety of fields, arts, business, sports, what did they kind of have in common? And they really found that there wasn't a lot of commonalities. Like they kind of thought, okay, maybe they'd all be morning people, or maybe they'd all be like night owls, or maybe they'd all be extroverted, maybe they'd all be introverted. But their research really didn't find a lot of good commonalities, other than the idea that these people who are really excelling in their field had a really strong sense of their personal strengths and were operating out of them. So really this belief that when we look at what people are best at, we can really increase our achievement, increase our life satisfaction. I'm going to talk some more about the values of understanding a strengths perspective, but really it's this idea of identifying 5 unique talent themes. So at the U of C, we often encourage the students to take the assessment themselves and to kind of find out what their actual top 5 are. Today, I'm aware that people in the session have not done that. So we're really going to take kind of a high level perspective. You don't need to know any theory. You don't need to know about this model. I'm really going to walk you through practically how you could maybe take some info from this session and apply it right now without them doing the assessment or anything like that. But do just kind of want to explain where this theory is coming from and the backing behind it. And so on that note, why do we encourage students to focus on their strengths? This is something we really work on in all areas kind of our work at the university. And some of the reasons are it does give us kind of a full spectrum of self-awareness. If you can think of, even for yourself, if you can look back to when you might have had a report card back in the day and thinking about how, you come home and it's like maybe A, C, and then our eyes are like really drawn to that C. And there's something to that, which is like, okay, maybe we want to raise areas that we could develop in. But I do think there is a real tendency for us as people to really focus in on what are the problems, what is wrong here, like what needs to be better, versus celebrating the things that we do really well, the things that we excel in, the things that we do better than other people. So just really recognizing not only areas for development, but also what can we say like, wow, I'm really good at, my student is really good at, and thinking about the things that we do well versus just what we do wrong. And strengths can also be a window into our skills and our values. So it's not just like, okay, here's something that I'm good at, I'm just going to pat myself on the back. It can help us to think, okay, this is something I'm really good at. Could I practice? Could I put it into action? How could I apply this to my career search? What does this mean about me as a person, the kind of job that I want to be in? So it's not just understanding strengths for the sake of it, but also we want to kind of leverage that into action and into what students can do with that information. Just a lot of research around how taking a strengths-based perspective to academics, to studying, to career searching, to any of those pieces can be really valuable in terms of just being overall more successful, rather than maybe trying to push at something that doesn't come as naturally to us, thinking about, okay, how can I leverage what I do really well to be very exceptional at this? Example I'll give for me is like, I'm a very strategic person. I really like to plan. And so even if I'm approaching something that is a little challenging or I haven't done before, I feel like if I can really apply that strategic thinking, that I can be very successful in that situation, even if it's something I haven't necessarily done before. We also like to encourage how it can help with teamwork. And what that means is like, sometimes we can be irritated by people, maybe, and we don't know why. But then we kind of realize that there's no ill intention there, but maybe it's two people who are just coming at something with a very different perspective. Like someone who really likes to work quietly on their own in a group project with somebody who really likes to talk out loud and brainstorm verbally. That could be conflict. But if they could maybe understand where they're coming from and understand that perspective, then it could be a bit more successful. And the final one I'll say, and then that's kind of the end of the background theory, is just avoiding burnout. We also want to encourage students to have fun, full, meaningful lives. And so celebrating the things that they do well and that excite them can be a really valuable part of this whole development process. And that can be valuable in and of itself. So hopefully you feel convinced that giving this a go and thinking this through is worth your time. Beautiful. And I did just kind of want to give a little bit of, like definitions here when we're talking about different pieces of this. So we really like to start with this idea of talents. So these are the things that our students kind of do really naturally. So you can think of anything. Maybe you find your student is really a talker. They love to engage with people. Or maybe you find that they really like to sit and think things through quietly. Just kind of those natural ways of being that we all have. Something we talk about in our office is like whether you like to talk to people on planes or not. I think that that's a really good example of like just those natural tendencies that it's sort of hard to get away from. Either you like to talk to someone on a plane or you really don't. But those are just kind of the intrinsic wired ways of being. But when we're talking about strength, it goes a bit further than that. So it's really the ability to consistently produce a positive outcome. So it's maybe taking that, okay, I'm a really social person. I really get along with people, but I've practiced it. I've honed my communication skills. I've applied that in different contexts. So it's not just like, okay, what does your student do well naturally, but also what have they maybe built on? What could they build on? So just to give a little bit of a kind of definition there, what we're talking about. All right. Okay. So like I said, I wanted to introduce you to the strengths model, but also to really kind of open it up to you to give you some ideas of things that might help you think about your child's strengths without having to do the assessment or the inventory. So these are some of the questions that can really help you. So maybe just if you have a piece of paper, you have something to write on, like feel free to kind of do this as we're going through. But you might think, okay, what do they do really well? And hopefully you can think of some things that you're like, wow, like that, I'm amazed that they can do that so well. I don't necessarily know where they learned it. It's really impressive. What do they pick up quickly? So they can kind of be maybe shown something. They don't really need a lot of instruction. It's something that really comes kind of naturally to them. What do others compliment them on? So sometimes we can be our own harshest critics. I work with students all the time who feel like, oh, I'm not any good at this. Like I'm like, yeah, like really hard on themselves. And I'm like looking at them and I'm like, you're amazing. What are you talking about? Like, you're at such a phenomenal place in your life. You're way ahead of where I was. You're like infinitely. And so sometimes other people can maybe be a better gauge of what people do well and our strengths. So thinking about teachers, peers, coaches, siblings, like what do other people sort of say that they're really good at? What can they do for hours? So thinking about the things where kind of time flies and it feels like, they really can kind of get engaged in a task for a long period of time. And sometimes we might not always agree with what that activity is. So let's say video games comes to mind. A lot of people can play video games for hours, and the first impulse might be to be like, okay, but not video games. But honestly, it does kind of tell us something about that, like maybe engaging with the community of the folks that they're playing with, the strategy that they like to do, that sense of sort of gamified accomplishment that's involved in that. So even if we think, okay, you can't turn a career out of this activity, we still kind of can get some valuable information about their strengths from thinking through those activities. And then finally, what do they enjoy doing? Again, this goes back to, we feel good when we like what we're doing and we're having fun and time is going by quickly. So yeah, really encourage you to take these questions away, and yeah, jot them down, think them through, kind of reflect. And yeah, if you're able to, even chatting with your student about that and kind of having some conversations around this. But it's a really good window into starting to get a sense of what their strengths might be. Okay, and then now coming into a little bit more of that Clifton strength side of things. So there's 4 domains of strength, and I think this is valuable to share even if you're not necessarily doing the inventory, because we're going to do kind of a little activity on the next slide where you can kind of think this through. But if you're struggling to maybe think about, okay, what strengths could my student possibly have? Some of these domains might help. So we kind of lump them into executing, which is like the getting things done. I actually don't think I have any in this column. So just so you know, even you don't always have them evenly spread. But the executing is really like, okay, maybe thinking about how your student can really, like, if they set a goal and they say they're going to do it, they do it. I'm going to give some more examples on the next slide, but just a high level overview. Influencing is kind of what it sounds like, the ability to influence others. So maybe those really social students, they're maybe always taking leadership on a project, kind of starting new initiatives, that would fall into the influencing category. Relationship building, of course, this is where 2 of my 5 are, but that connecting with people, really having a sense of what other people need and being able to kind of adapt to that, and those social butterflies that you might find for sure. And then strategic thinking, which is where my other 3 are, is really that planning and looking ahead and kind of envisioning how to approach something. So when you're thinking about your students' strengths, this could be maybe a helpful window to say, okay, I'm not sure like on a nitty-gritty level, but I feel like on a high level, they're really great at planning, or they're really good at relationship building, or they're really good at influencing or getting things done. And there's going to be some more examples on this next slide.
Also, too, I wanted to kind of throw in my 2 cents worth, because I do the Clifton strengths with a lot of university students, and by far the number one for the university students is restorative, and then achiever is very high. So restorative is basically problem solvers, and achievers are, people that get stuff done. So it's really fun to work with achievers because they make me look good. And that's what I've noticed with the students at the University of Calgary. Anyway.
Oh, that is an interesting fun fact. Yeah. I feel like the other thing I'll mention, if people are curious, is that, very often you don't have an even mix in all of these areas. Often you're in 1 or 2. Some people do. Yeah. David, you're an even mix?
I'm all in relationship.
Oh, right. Wow.
So yeah. I'm a very it's funny, but when I remember when I did the assessment, and then my boss said, well, it's really kind of funny. David's got all 5 in relationship building, yet he's single. And I was like, yeah, that's really weird. And then she said, yeah, maybe I need one in executing. Right. And I think maybe that's why I am single, because I have lots of relationships. Right.
Yeah, that's very funny. Yeah, 100%. So yes, it's a good point that you can kind of do all kinds of things in life, even if you don't have strengths in all of these areas, but it just kind of gives you a window into how you approach things. So yeah, thanks, David. Beautiful. Okay, so this was applying it a bit more to this parenting context, to thinking about working with students. So taking away kind of the terminology of strengths and just looking at, okay, this is what you might notice. So for executing, it could be, yeah, when they set their mind to something, they do it. They're very self-confident. They believe in themselves. When they're interested in something, I can't break their focus. They're really stuck with band. They practice their instrument every day. So those are all good examples of things where you might say, okay, I feel like my student does have some strengths in executing. Yeah, and then I was just gonna go on to influencing here. So yeah, they're very charismatic. They can win people over to their side in a debate. They always seem to be the group leader. They really like to compete, like they get really fired up by competition. And something I just want to point out here is, like, these are not statements that someone's going to put on their cover letter or their resume necessarily. You know, you're not necessarily going to put on your resume that, yeah, like, when I'm interested in something, I can't break focus. But it's more for them to sort of know and start to be able to own some of the language and to think about, okay, what kind of jobs might they be interested in? Where can they really excel? So even though this is not directly career-oriented language, it's going to kind of help them start to get there and start to get on the path of where they might want to be going here. Relationship building, so they care about other people's feelings, they help everyone get along, they go with the flow, they don't mind when plans change, they always see the bright side. Again, some of these, depending on your situation, can be seen as not strengths. Like I'm an empathy, and I feel like the flip side of that is someone could say that I'm like a people pleaser. And I do think about that sometimes, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, I'm not going to try to be something different than I am. I can try to mitigate the risks. But it is interesting how sometimes our students have maybe got negative messaging about things that they're actually really amazing about. And so it's kind of cool to flip this and see it in a different lens. Strategic thinking, they always have a plan A, B, and C. They spend a lot of time daydreaming about the future. They go down research rabbit holes when they're interested in something. They ask really good questions. They ask too many questions, you know? So these are just some examples of things that might peg you into the domains where you might find your students. So would definitely love if you're kind of writing out some things on the side, thinking about your student, and some of these might not resonate, but that's totally okay, because I'm sure there's some other ones that aren't on here that you can think of, and those are really valuable as well. Okay. Yes, and then so just to kind of finish off the strengths conversation and transition into some of the bigger career development conversations, we wanted to share some questions that we find helpful in our work and that we thought would maybe be helpful for you in your conversations. And again, this is just really taking a strengths-based perspective. So, you know, some of the common questions of like, what do you want to do for your whole life? Like, are you going to be able to make any money at that? Like, those questions can be a little stressful. And we're going to talk a lot about how to maybe open up our framework on that topic. But here's some examples of questions that we really like that can kind of get at this strengths-based perspective. So like, what are their favorite classes and their projects? What did they do in their classes that they want to do more of? What problem in society would they like to help solve? We really like to think about that perspective. Okay, that's an interesting career idea, like video game streamer. Okay, how could you learn more about that career? How have they made big decisions in the past? We really like to encourage, you know, a huge piece of development is students starting to kind of own that they have the ability to solve a lot of their problems and a lot of self-resilience in these areas. And really at the end of the day, it's going to be their career journey. So how have they kind of approached this when they've been solving big problems before? And also, like, what just sounds like an exciting next step. So some of these actually David's going to talk a little bit more about as we go through, but so just some questions to maybe take away and consider that we like to use and might help kind of open up the conversation. So yeah, now just going to kind of pass it. David's going to really get more into the career nitty gritty here.
Okay, yeah. So it's not, I need to find one passion. It's not, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? I think those are not good quality career questions. And it's, where can I apply my strengths and interest and get paid? I think it's more, what do you want to do? And like, I'll have some really serious questions with students and get them to answer with honesty. And it's not, yeah, like asking young people, what do you want to do for the rest of your life is just, it's not realistic. And so, yeah, I'm now going to jump into sort of how we help students. And I remember when I started at the University of Calgary, this was kind of our career development model. It was like a step ladder. So I think it gets animated. So just kind of plunk in all the steps. Yeah, know yourself, explore your options, get focused, take action, and then you're set for success. And I always kind of hated that. It didn't really make sense, because it's not do this first, this second, this third, this fourth. We know life is not like that. Life is more circular. It's more like a spinning wheel and a roll of the dice. So what we did at Career Services at the University of Calgary is we changed our career model, and it's a circle. Now I'm going to show off our model, and this is our career development wheel. And really it's quite simple, but it's reflecting. And if you're able to really reflect and know yourself, because in my opinion, that's at the heart of career development. And we go by the VISTA: values, interests, skills, strengths, traits, ambitions. What skills and attributes do you have to offer? So I really truly think the better you know yourself, good, bad, things you like, things you don't like, you'll be able to make better decisions. And you can now move on to the next part of the wheel, which is exploring. And then that can help you identify sort of like what organizations, what training, what occupations, and probably more important than occupations, in my opinion, is what industry do you want to work in? So I help lots of accountants, and they're like, oh, I want to be an accountant. Great, but what industry, right? So it's really important to get students to think about industries and where they want to work. So we have lots of resources to help students explore. And then the next part of the wheel, well, actually, no, I think, yeah, so the next slide is more, these are some questions I'll ask students, like, who are you? And I'll say to them, like, what are you taking? Why are you taking that? What's your attitude? What are your strengths and unique talents? How do you work? How do you solve problems? It's very important to talk with the student about what are their weaknesses and what are they doing to make improvements on it. Because I always think successful people, they always find jobs and they have success in their careers based on their strengths and talents, but they're always working on improving things too. So we'll work with students on what are their weaknesses, and we'll get them to like with mock interviews, I'll help students answer that question in a very positive way. And then what interests you? And really also too, like I wouldn't want to ask students like, how are you? Because with career development, I always kind of put career development in third place in life. And I think in first place is you and how you're doing and your like wellness. And so you want your number one, you well and good. And then you want your number two is always your job. So if you're a student at university or any post-secondary, your job is to be the best student you can possibly be. And you want to be doing well in that. So you want to be good in your one, to your job, and then you can worry about some career development third, right? So let's show the rest of the wheel on the next slide. And yeah, so preparing stuff, like most students, they kind of think that we just help students with resumes, and they'll come into my office. Well, back in the good old days, it would come into my office. Now it's more virtual, but they'll come into my office and they'll say, oh, I need help with my resume. And I'll say, well, what's the resume for? And they'll say, oh, a job. And then I'll say, well, what job? And they'll say, well, I don't know, just any job. Well, then I can't really help them with the resume, because what job's what's the resume for? So it's really, a lot of students come in and they book appointments to help with their cover letter and resume, but really we have to go to the reflect part of the wheel and get to know what makes them them. And then you can explore, and then you can work on your resume. But we really help students develop resumes and CVs, cover letters, help them prep for interviewing, and also help them manage their online presence. So that's all in the preparation part of the wheel. And then in the act part of the wheel, that's the part that's probably the most important. That's gaining experience, networking, applying for jobs. So yeah, we say apply to lots of jobs, attend events, because that's one great thing about the University of Calgary and all post-secondaries really, is employers like to come to university and SAIT and Mount Royal to connect with students, and they have lots of events. So, and we run events at Career Services, but there's lots of events run by the faculty offices and clubs and the Hunter Hub and stuff like that. So we're always telling students to network while they're at their post-secondary, because that's the easiest time to network. Volunteering is huge. I'm a huge believer in volunteer experience, and I really like to put that volunteer experience up high on people's resumes and treat it with the same respect as paid jobs. Setting up information interviews, which is when you talk to people working in jobs to learn about jobs, to learn about industries, is probably the best way to gather research on careers. So we always say to students, talk to somebody that does the job that likes it, talk to somebody that does the job that hates it, and then talk to somebody that used to do the job. And then you'll really find out if you really want to do the job or not. And then when you make those connections, you can sometimes job shadow. And another great place to gather information, I know when I decided to become a career development specialist, I joined the Career Development Association of Alberta, and I started connecting with people that were members of that association. So that's our career development wheel. And then maybe go back to the career development wheel, because we have it's a circle, right? So it's not you've done this and then you just move on. So it's always constantly going and moving. And then we have the external factors, which is really interesting and kind of, it's out of your control. So external factors, like, I mean, look what's happened with COVID. I mean, we all had to work from home, and that was an external factor. I also think sometimes the economy is an external factor too. So that's just the parts of the career that are more or less out of your control, but you have to be aware of that. But that's our amazing career development wheel. So what we do with students is, it depending on what they're taking, we really individualize our services to the students. But it's one thing I always tell students is companies don't hire majors. Companies hire people, and they look for skills, and they hire for fit. So it's really, your university degree is really, it's important, but it's also what else did you do when you were at university is probably just as important. And so you want to get involved. So I always tell students, join a club. And then the students say, well, there's no clubs I want to join. Well, then create a club or take over a club, right? Projects. We have great experiential learning at the University of Calgary, and lots of projects, student associations, labs, field schools, sports, absolutely take part in sports, part-time work, co-op internships, summer jobs is a great way to test out careers. A lot of people, they want to be teachers, and I'm like, are you sure you want to be a teacher? And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm going, well, let's get you a job as a camp counselor and maybe see if you want to be a teacher or be a tutor. Friendships, connections. So that there's lots of different things you can do when you go to university or any post-secondary, but try and get involved a little bit is always really good. And then we'll make that look good on the resume and put that on their LinkedIn and stuff like that. So the next slide is really, I'm kind of a John Crumbolt's career development theorist more than anything. And he's really big on the planned happenstance. So I know we tell people, make a career decision, but John Crumbolt's is, and this is the way I like to view career development, is keep your options open, keep your career options open. Don't follow your dream, test your dream one step at a time. That's a really good guideline. Don't wait around for a lucky break. One thing I've noticed about like career success is luck. Like somebody helped me get this job. And it wasn't luck. Like luck is not an accident. You put yourself in a time and space for luck to happen to you. So get out there, be active. That's one thing we really promote students to do, is be active and reach out to organizations, reach out to people that have jobs you're curious about. And you know what? If you're out there being active, luck will happen to you. So luck is not an accident. Then take risks. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail and make some mistakes and try some things, get out of your comfort zone a little bit. But remember, with every mistake, if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, that's not healthy. So I mean, as human beings, we learn to walk. We don't just get up and walk instantly. We walk a couple steps, fall, and then we're a little more cautious the next time, but we learn to walk pretty quickly. So with every mistake, we must surely be learning. I'm a huge Beatles fan, so I always got to throw a Beatles metaphor into my workshops. Then the other thing is, and this actually helped me out a lot too, is get a job and learn how to do it. I remember after university, I applied for a job at a transportation company. And the guy said to me, well, David, you don't have any experience. And I was like, I know I don't have any experience. I want experience. I want to learn. I'd like you, hire me, train me. I'll learn everything that you can teach me. And he hired me on that. So that's one great thing about university students, especially in the arts, is that they're very trainable. And so get the job and then learn how to do it. And then have that never stop learning attitude. Right. So if somebody says, oh, I'm done with school, then I'm thinking like, all right, I hope you have a great career, because you really want to never stop learning and always keep improving and enhancing yourself. And I really like that question Victoria had on one of the questions was, what would be exciting or interesting to try next? And that's always a really good career question, no matter where you are in your career. So, yeah. And then we really wanted to kind of now focus on kind of tips on how you can help your students' career journey. And it's kind of tricky because with parents, you want to support and encourage reflection, but you also want to help motivate them, because I remember a career specialist once told me, well, do something you love to do and then find somebody to pay you to do it. But I mean, I love listening to music and watching movies, but I've never been able to find a job that would, pay me to do that. So I mean, you have to remember it's not all fun and games and enjoyment. I mean, you have to find a job and you have to find a job, and then you have to be able to make that company money, or else you'll maybe lose that job. So it's all employment and you have to acknowledge the realities. I think is very important. And really successful careers, in my opinion, it's compromising. And it's having a wish list of what you want in a job, but then realizing that you have to get the job, and you have to compromise. And so I always encourage students when they look at job postings to talk themselves into jobs and to what would they enjoy about it. And I think if they enjoy, say, 51% of it and think they don't enjoy 49% of it, then I think that's worth applying and applying for that job. And what happens is you get a job early in your career, and it's maybe not the best job in the world, but you have a good boss. So maybe you like 55% of it and you dislike 45% of it. But then a year later, the boss calls you in and says, okay, David, you're doing pretty good at this part of the job, but you're not so good at this part of the job. And then I say, yeah, well, I really like that part of the job that I'm good at, and you complimented me on, but I don't like doing that other stuff. And then they say, yeah, you're really terrible at that other stuff. So we're going to get Victoria to do that other stuff because she's better at that. And why don't you do more of this stuff? Because Victoria doesn't like doing some of these things. And they kind of massage the job to your strengths and talents. And if you really look at kind of sports teams, the really good sports teams will do that. I always, like with baseball and hockey, it's the team that wins the Stanley Cup in hockey. I think talent wise, probably all the teams are about the same talent wise, but why does one team win the Stanley Cup? I think it's because they utilize the strengths and abilities of their players better than the other teams. It's kind of coaching. So anyway, that's sort of my 2 cents worth. But yeah, that's the next slide. We're finishing up pretty early here.
Well, lots of time for questions, but
yeah.
Yeah, so we just want to kind of point you to this resource if you were interested and you think your student might be interested in doing the inventory. You can just kind of find it online, Clifton Strengths for Students. There's a book you can buy that comes with a code, or you can just buy the code off the website. To be clear, we are not like sponsored by Clifton Strengths or anything like that. So we're genuinely recommending this because we use it with our students and we love it, and it's helped us and it's helped our students. It's not like we're getting like a kickback for recommending you go sign up for this. So we do believe in it. So something that, yeah, maybe you want to pass on recommending the book or just taking the inventory. But it's honestly, yeah, we've really worked with so many students who found it really valuable. And when you do it, it also gives you kind of a longer report that says, okay, here's how you might apply this to your work. These are the kind of jobs you might be interested in. There's a lot of information that comes with it that's really interesting. A lot of the students we work with kind of read the report and are like, wow, this put into words something that I have thought about myself, but I didn't have the language for. So it can be really impactful. But just if you were interested, that is available. But if not, the other option is just what we kind of walked you through earlier in the session, which is to just kind of have them identify what they think their strengths are. For you to do that, that's equally as valuable, you know, to some extent, is what you've observed in your student.
And actually, I really like the Clifton Strengths. It really helped me with my strengths, because one of the strengths that I didn't think I had was adaptability. And I don't know why I didn't think I had it, but I just think, oh, I'm not adaptable. I'm not adaptable. Maybe it's something I heard from my parents or coworkers or something. And I'm not adaptable. I'm not adaptable. And then I did the Clifton Strengths, and it popped up as my number 2. And then my coach asked me a couple of questions, and it made me kind of relook at myself and going, I guess I am adaptable. And I'm very adaptable, and I'll use my adaptability with how I do my job. Now, the other strength that really was interesting for me was positivity. And I never looked at the positivity as a strength, because again, I don't know. It's because if you have, with every strength, there's kind of a dark side to it a little bit. And because I'm a happy person, I'm enthusiastic, and I'm always using humor and stuff like that. But also, like, so maybe some people don't take me seriously, but just because I use humor and I'm enthusiastic doesn't mean I'm serious. Like, I'm very serious about career development and stuff. And then I remember one time I heard my parents actually talking on the phone about me, and my mom saying, "Oh yeah, David, oh yeah, his head's in the clouds. He's a happy-go-lucky kid. He'll like doing that. He's so positive." And that kind of put myself down a little bit. But you know what? My positivity is a strength. And I remember when I did the Clifton Strengths and it said positivity and then gave the definition. And then I remember when I was 15 years old, I got diabetes. And then I remember I went to the emergency room and the doctor told me I was diabetic. And I was like, "So that means I have to take needles?" And he was like, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that." And he said, "Well, we'll show you how to do that and stuff." And I said, "Okay, well, bring it on. Okay, I'm diabetic. Let's go. And that's the positivity, right? So that's the talent there. So it put a title to something that I didn't think was a strength. And many times with students, like especially with deliberative, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I take time making decisions," and I'm like, "That's a strength. That's deliberative. That means you make better decisions because you take more time to make the decision, thus avoiding problems." So it allows us to really help the students understand what their talents are, and then they can then share that when they're networking and when they're exploring their career options. And they got to find jobs that use those talents because those are their money makers. So that's why I really like the Clifton Strengths.
Totally. I also really agree with that, and that I think it can help students think about. Sometimes we have like one idea of like, this is how you should study. This is the right way to study, or like, this is how you should apply for a job. This is the right way to apply for a job. But really thinking about, okay, like how can the student really uniquely understand themselves if there's someone who maybe really needs a lot of time to think and make decisions and study quietly, and they're trying to study in a really loud room with a big group, then maybe there's some problems happening there. Or yeah, so just really trying to think about how can they kind of hone their schedule and their habits to better support their sort of natural preferences and inclinations. Like for myself, I have Relator, which really goes along with connecting with a small group of people. To me, I can think of myself as like, I'm not really a social butterfly. Like going to a party and not knowing anyone sounds like a nightmare to me. And I always felt badly about that. But now I really try to think out, okay, how can I sit down with one or two people and have a deep conversation in a big chaotic situation? So it's really helped me think about, okay, it's not that I don't want to be social in a big group, but I really want to connect with a few people and really get to know them in that setting. So it can just help them kind of tweak things a little bit to better support their natural strengths.
Absolutely.
So we're definitely going to open things up to questions, and happy to talk about all the things, but we did also just want to provide our information because I know David and I both love to talk about these topics and would happily share more. We talk for hours. So if you would like to reach out to either of us, please do feel free. We're happy to kind of consult or chat about any of the topics that came up. But yeah, I think we did want to kind of open things up for questions. Yeah, or I don't know if you had any final thoughts there, David, as well.
Well, yeah, because one thing too is there are different, like at the University of Calgary, there are different types of degrees, right? Like there's business degrees, or you can get an accounting or teacher or engineer, but then there's arts degrees, right? And that's what I have. I have an arts degree. I thought I was doing, when I went to university, an English history degree, but it turned out I didn't take some first year English class I was supposed to take. So I ended up majoring in history and Canadian studies and politics. And all I knew at the end of my degree was that I did not want to go into politics because I had studied poli-sci, and you kind of study everything that's wrong with government, and it's I don't know, I just was kind of discouraged with politics in general, and just all I knew at the end of my degree was I didn't want to have a career in politics. And then I was kind of lost for the next 10 years. So with my career, and I job jumped, I had 9 jobs in 10 years, and I wasn't really good at any of those jobs. And then eventually I lost my job, and then I saw a career specialist, and he asked me, and I'll never forget this, but he said, "David, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you better figure it out." So I went and I did all the reflection stuff and some self-assessments and started talking to people and talking to loads of people. And then I realized, I went back to him 3 weeks later and I said, "Listen, I want your job. I want to be a career specialist." And so that's with the arts degrees, they're fantastic degrees, but they're general degrees, right? So it's really, yeah, we have to help those art students kind of figure out their journey, get them to try stuff. We have micro placements, there's lots of internships and co-ops and summer jobs and volunteer jobs, and get them to try stuff. So by the end of their arts degree, they have more or less a direction on where they want to go next and become a specialist. And the great advantage of having an arts degree is if you decide to do an arts degree and then become a teacher, great, you can go become a teacher. And then 5 years later, you decide, "Oh, I don't want to be a teacher anymore." You still have that arts degree, and then you can just shift your career into HR or whatever you want to do with your career. So having an arts degree is a great degree. It'll open up options for you. But that's the problem when you go to university, is it gives you too many career options. That's a good problem to have from a career perspective. So, and all the schools, I'm a graduate from Mount Royal. I went to SAIT, so, and they're all fantastic schools. Yeah, and they all have great career departments and things like that. So get your students to check in and with their career departments. Absolutely. But let's open it up, yeah, for some questions.
Wow, so much great information there. I was going through all the categories, and I've got 3 boys right now at 3 different levels of their job career situation. I've got a 4th year science student at U of C. I've got a son that's doing full-time, just a basic job that he got after high school. And I've got one that just got his first job yesterday.
Oh,
So we've got
congrats.
all these different ranges. And of course, being 3 different kids, they've all got 3 completely different personalities. So I'm going through all these points that you laid out there, and I'm going, okay, well, this one's that, and this one's this, and this one's that. So it is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad. And it is so interesting how, yeah, even in families, you'll see completely different strengths and different approaches. So it can really help to kind of understand some of the differences there, and then some overlap, which is nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what's interesting with me and my family is I'm surrounded by engineers. I'm a very arts person. I write and I've always been interested in films and stuff like that. But my dad is a mechanical engineer, and my 2 older brothers are mechanical engineers, and my 2 older brothers both married engineers. So it's like, and then there's me, the kind of English history kid, and I'm surrounded by engineers. But one thing I noticed is engineers like to dive deep, and they want to know why stuff works the way it works, and they want to understand it. I do that with the arts though. So I'll watch a good movie, and then I'll I want to dive deep, and I watch The Godfather, and then I'll read like 12 books on The Godfather and how they made that movie. So that's kind of the engineering in me a little bit, but I guess because we're kind of chips off the old block, right? And yeah, it's interesting.
So does anybody else have any questions they'd like to put to David or Victoria? A quiet crowd tonight.
It's late on a Tuesday, we know.
Well, that was all great information. Thank you so much for spending this time with us tonight. we've got your contact information up there for our parents who are going to tune in at a later time and view your video and go through it with their children. So thank you again so much. And thank you to Elizabeth for arranging this for us this evening. We really hope that some of our Central Memorial parents have gotten a lot out of this presentation. And yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. And yeah, good luck. If you put any of this into practice, feel free to update us.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take
Thanks
care. Have a
again.
good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.